In this video, I think it would be sensible to look at what good assessment practice means for speaking and listening, because speaking and listening is a new component. Many teachers won't have assessed speaking and listening before, so just to make clear what City and Guild's expectations are for assessors and for the assessment process for speaking and listening at the three levels, and I think it's probably the same across all three levels.
Yes, it is, Hilary. The key thing is assessment. So summative assessment, and that actually means assessors assessing the competence, the skills and the knowledge of the people against set criteria. Now I use the term people and I mean students, learners.
Okay, great. So how would you describe an assessor?
An assessor is somebody who understands the assessment process, somebody who is familiar with the assessment model, and they really need to be aware of the activities at each level and what the expectations are at the level.
So do you think it's important for them to understand the difference between the levels?
Oh, definitely.
So looking at the syllabus, making sure they're clear about entry, level 1 and level 2, and the different skills that learners need to present at each level.
Yes, because looking at the assessment packs, it may seem as though everything's the same because they're very similar activities. That's for the benefit of the learners. It's going up the level at each stage that makes it different. So they're assessing against different criteria.
Okay. I've made a list of all the things that I think make a good assessor. If I read them out, would you be able to elaborate on each of those points?
I can try.
So in the eyes of a City and Guilds quality assurance specialist, what do you think I mean by those points?
Okay.
So the first one is that the assessor understands the assessment process.
Yes, the assessment process is not only the assessor, it's also the IV and then the external verifier. So there's quite a lot to it, and actually having an understanding of that process will help them along the way.
Okay, so it's understanding what their role is in the bigger quality
Yes.
assurance process. Okay. What about being familiar with the assessment model and the assessment activities at each level?
That's actually quite key, because if the assessor doesn't know what the expectations are of the candidate, then how can the candidate possibly achieve?
Okay, so
Does that make sense?
Yes, so the assessor needs to be very clear about what's in the paper,
Yes.
what the activities are, what the candidate's expected to do,
Yes.
and how they're expected to perform.
Yes, and also the level.
Yes.
The level is key.
Okay, so they can go back to the handbook, look at the syllabus for the level, and look at the different skills and expectations for each of the units and each of the criteria.
And of course the assessor is provided with a mark scheme that gives you clear guidance as to what the candidate should be producing during the speaking and listening assessment.
Lovely, thank you. So the sort of documentation then that we would expect the assessor to be familiar with would be the handbook,
Yep.
the assessment papers and the format of them,
Yes.
and the assessment pack, so the mark scheme and how the marks are going to be awarded for each of the activities.
Because there's also they need to be aware of how the marks are awarded.
Right. And sometimes there's more than one mark
Yes.
available for an activity.
Yes.
Right, okay, thank you. Another point that I thought about was being clear about what good evidence looks like, because as an assessor, internal assessment involves assessors recording some of the statements or some of the things that the candidates say to help demonstrate they've met the criteria. So how do you define good
That's
evidence?
right. In the mark scheme, there is space for the assessor to write down evidence of how a candidate met the criteria. We don't want a blow-by-blow account. It's not an observation record. It's an assessment record of what was said and how it was said.
So I see. So things that candidates say that help to tell the story in a way of how they've met those criteria.
Yes, so it could be examples of language used. I mean, one of the things that we need to mention here, this is actually Jamaican Standard English that's being used in this assessment.
Right.
To help the candidates be work ready.
And that's a good point, because in the assessment pack that goes with the candidate's paper, there is quite a detailed set of do's and don'ts, if you like, guidance for people who are conducting the assessment. Okay, what about preparation? How are candidates expected to prepare for some of these activities?
Well, you've been supplied with a sample pack, and in that sample pack for each level you will have a mark scheme, a question paper, and at level 1 and level 2 there's also a source document booklet.
Right.
You also have the handbook, which gives you all the details. That's where your syllabus is contained.
Okay, so there's quite a lot of documentation to be, so a good assessor will have accessed all of that, spent some time looking through it, explained it to candidates where that's necessary.
Assessors must be familiar with the expectations of the assessment.
Okay, and so in preparing candidates where that's appropriate, they need to give them, let's say it's a group discussion, they need to give them a week's notice? Or?
A week's notice would be good, because they have to prepare for a presentation at level 2 plus a group discussion.
Right.
At entry level and level 1 they're going to have a discussion. There's no reason why they can't prepare. In fact, they should be preparing for that discussion
in good time.
Yes.
Right, good, okay. So I think one of the things about good assessors is that practice is essential. So practice, practicing the activities before the live assessment takes place, so that everyone's comfortable, the learner, the assessor, everybody's clear about their role and what the expectations are.
But the expectations are also that you will have practiced this as part of the teaching and learning process.
Right, okay.
And that you have covered a variety of topics in a variety of discussion formats.
Right, again, so they're feeling well prepared and they're comfortable. In the speaking and listening, at entry level and at level 1, there's a discrete listening activity. So that's going to be taken on a fixed date.
Yes.
So what would you recommend there? What would a good assessor do to prepare for that?
You could, if you have facilities, you could use YouTube or various other formats, or even just reading a piece of text and getting students to answer questions.
Okay, so giving them lots of practice ahead of that. Could be a tape, could be something from the TV or radio, or it could be a text that you read out. So giving them exposure to lots of different types of text, so that they're used to
it's about listening comprehension.
Used to taking notes.
Yes.
Okay. And also, if you're a good assessor, I believe it's good practice to go and watch other assessors doing the same job.
Oh, that's a wonderful way of actually learning on the job, but also being able to support somebody else in assessing.
Okay, so watching live assessments being conducted by other people.
Yes.
It's good practice, it gives you experience, it gives you confidence, and it helps you to support other people who are in the same role as you.
Definitely.
So where we can build that in, it's not essential, but it's great practice if you get an opportunity to do it. Well, those are some really useful points. Thank you.